or political pressure to appear strong. At the center of all this are ordinary people, particularly Iranian civilians, who bear the heaviest burden. Protesters face violence at home, while the broader population fears the possibility of war, sanctions, and further isolation from the global community. In summary, the situation is a dangerous intersection of domestic unrest, international rivalry, historical mistrust, and political signaling. Whether this moment leads to reform, repression, or conflict will depend on decisions made under intense pressure, decisions that could shape regional and global stability for years to come. As this situation continues to evolve, the world watches closely. What happens next will depend on restraint, diplomacy, and the choices made by powerful leaders under intense pressure. We will continue to follow this story and bring you verified updates as they unfold. You're watching International Broadcast. Thank you for staying informed. Into this volatile environment stepped Donald Trump, whose comments dramatically increased international attention. Trump's warning that the United States is locked and loaded if protesters are killed was interpreted by Iran as both a moral condemnation and a military threat. Given Trump's past actions against Iran, Tehran cannot easily dismiss such statements as empty rhetoric. From the Iranian government's viewpoint, Trump's remarks confirm long-held beliefs that foreign powers seek to exploit internal unrest to weaken the state. This perception allows hardliners to frame protests as foreign-backed conspiracies rather than organic movements, justifying harsher measures against demonstrators in the name of sovereignty and national defense. For the United States, the situation presents a complex dilemma. On one hand, American leaders face pressure to defend human rights and condemn violence against civilians. On the other, direct intervention, military or otherwise, risks triggering a wider regional conflict that could draw in U.S. allies and adversaries alike. The broader Middle East context further complicates matters. Iran is deeply embedded in regional power struggles through alliances and proxy forces. Any escalation between Washington and Tehran could ignite conflicts in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, or the Persian Gulf, turning a domestic Iranian crisis into a multinational confrontation. Global economic stability is also at stake. Iran sits near key energy shipping routes, and even the threat of conflict can drive oil prices higher. Markets react not only to actions but to uncertainty, and heightened U.S.-Iran tensions create exactly the kind of unpredictability that rattles investors and governments worldwide. Diplomatic channels remain active, but fragile. International actors are urging restraint, fearing that strong language on both sides could lead to miscalculation. History shows that wars often begin not by intention, but by misunderstanding, overreaction. Amid all this, the human cost cannot be ignored. Iranian civilians face violence, fear, and uncertainty. History shows that ordinary people suffer the most when political tensions escalate into conflict. The coming days are critical. Iran must decide how to handle internal unrest, while global powers weigh how far they are willing to push. Diplomacy, restraint, and communication could prevent catastrophe, but miscalculation remains a real danger. This crisis highlights a fragile moment in global affairs, where strong words carry enormous consequences. Whether this chapter ends in reform, repression, or renewed conflict will shape the future of the Middle East, and the world. We will continue to bring you verified updates as this story develops. The current situation between the United States and Iran is the result of multiple overlapping crises rather than a single event. Iran is facing severe internal pressure from its own population due to economic collapse, political repression, and long-standing public frustration. At the same time, decades of hostility between Tehran and Washington have created an environment where even verbal threats can quickly escalate into dangerous confrontations. Iran's economy is at the heart of the unrest. Years of international sanctions, combined with internal mismanagement, have led to skyrocketing inflation, a weak currency, and widespread unemployment. Many Iranians struggle to afford basic necessities such as food, fuel, and medicine. This economic pain has eroded public trust in the government and intensified anger toward the ruling elite. The protests spreading across Iran are not isolated or short-lived. They represent a deeper societal shift, particularly among younger generations who feel disconnected from the political system. These protesters are not only demanding economic relief but also greater personal freedoms, transparency, and political accountability. demands that directly challenge the authority of Iran's leadership. Iranian officials quickly condemned Trump's statement, calling it reckless, provocative, and an act of foreign interference. Senior leaders warned that any U.S. intervention, military or otherwise, would be met with what they described as a decisive and painful response. Military commanders emphasized that Iran is fully capable of defending itself and its interests across the region. State television broadcast images of missile systems, military drills, and armed forces on high alert, clear signals aimed at both domestic and foreign audiences. The Middle East is already one of the most volatile regions on Earth. Any spark between the U.S. and Iran could ignite multiple fronts. Iran maintains influence through allied groups in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. A confrontation could quickly expand beyond Iran's borders. U.S. military bases across the region could become targets, as could American allies. Israel, long opposed to Iran's regional ambitions, would likely be drawn into any major escalation. Beyond the Middle East, the consequences would be global. Oil prices would likely surge, shipping routes could be disrupted, and global markets could face serious instability. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway critical to global energy supply, would become a major flashpoint. Even limited conflict could have ripple effects felt by consumers worldwide. International leaders have urged restraint. European governments emphasize diplomacy and human rights protections rather than military threats. The United Nations has called on all parties to avoid escalation and respect international law. Behind closed doors, diplomats are working to prevent rhetoric from turning into reality. In the United States, reactions to Trump's remarks are sharply divided. Supporters argue that strong warnings deter violence and show moral leadership. Critics warn that aggressive language could backfire, strengthening hardliners in Iran and increasing the risk of war. Human rights organizations say several protesters have been killed, though exact figures remain unclear due to tight media controls. Thousands have reportedly been detained. Iran's leadership maintains that these protests are not organic. Officials claim foreign intelligence agencies and hostile governments are fueling unrest to destabilize the Islamic Republic. State-run media frequently accuse the United States, Israel, and European nations of orchestrating what they call a soft war against Iran. This narrative has long been used by Tehran to rally domestic support and justify harsh crackdowns in the name of national security. Against this tense backdrop, Donald Trump stepped into the spotlight with a public warning aimed directly at Tehran. In his statement, Trump declared that the United States would not stand by if peaceful protesters were slaughtered, and that the military was ready to respond if Iran crossed that line. The phrase, locked and loaded, immediately drew attention. It is a term traditionally associated with military readiness and imminent action. Trump did not specify what kind of action the U.S. would take, leaving the world guessing whether the threat involved sanctions, cyber operations, covert actions, or direct military strikes. What is clear is that Trump's words were deliberate, and consistent with his long-standing approach toward Iran. During his presidency, Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Iran nuclear deal, arguing it failed to stop Tehran's long-term nuclear ambitions. He imposed sweeping economic sanctions that crippled Iran's economy, targeting oil exports, banking systems, and key industries. Perhaps most dramatically, Trump authorized the killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in a U.S. drone strike, a move that nearly sparked open war. That history makes Trump's latest warning especially significant. Tehran remembers those decisions, and takes his words seriously. Good evening and welcome to International Broadcast. Tonight, we bring you an unfolding international crisis that has reignited fears of war in the Middle East and raised serious questions about global security, diplomacy, and the future of U.S.-Iran relations. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has issued one of his strongest warnings yet toward Iran, stating that the United States is locked and loaded should Iranian authorities continue violent crackdowns on protesters inside the country. Those words, short, sharp, and heavy with military implication, have reverberated far beyond Washington and Tehran, echoing through world capitals, global markets, and diplomatic corridors. Tonight, we will break down exactly what is happening inside Iran, why Donald Trump's statement matters, how Iran has responded, and what this could mean for the world if tensions spiral further. Iran is facing one of its most serious internal crises in years. The country's economy is under severe strain, with inflation soaring, unemployment rising, and the national currency, the rial, losing significant value. For ordinary Iranians, daily life has become increasingly difficult. Basic necessities are becoming unaffordable, fuel prices fluctuate wildly, and frustration with government policies has reached a boiling point. These economic pressures have spilled into the streets. Protests erupted initially over economic grievances but quickly evolved into broader calls for political reform, accountability, and social freedoms. Young people, students, workers, and even retirees have joined demonstrations across multiple cities. Videos circulating online, despite internet restrictions, show crowds chanting against corruption and authoritarian rule. Iranian authorities responded with force. Security units were deployed, tear gas was used, mass arrests followed, and live ammunition was reportedly fired in some areas.